I love the sound of my own voice. By clicking on this video and continuing from here, you have agreed to listen to me make a 10-minute video in 30 minutes. Thank you. Please continue. I have gotten a lot of practice recently with GarageBand specifically, and FL Studio has kind of been left to the wayside somewhat, which is not intentional, but when you work 4 and 5 days a week and you get to use GarageBand while you're at your job all day, I don't want to go to work for 10 hours and make music for 8 hours of it, and then on my 2 days off, come home and make music. You know what I mean? But that said, I'm not really considering this a bad thing. It's given me a lot of headway into working on the album that I've wanted to make for a while, which I'm not going to reveal here, but it is a thing that's happening. And given how much work I've been doing recently on music on GarageBand, I have developed a little more of a workflow, and I thought it would be cool to make a little video basically showing you the process from beginning to end with how I make my music. And just as a side note, by the way, even though I did decide that I would include videos of all of this, this is kind of meant to be a video that you can turn your phone off and put in your pocket. Well, I guess if you have YouTube Premium or whatever. But I'm not going to do all the work to put a bunch of visuals everywhere because I don't think they're required for a video like this. And I should also preface that this guide video, whatever you want to call it, is meant for someone who is using Bluetooth. You will see me do a couple of things in this video that, you know, considering that I know how to play piano, you might be thinking to yourself, well, why doesn't he just play it on the piano then? Just press record and play it with the song. Because when you use Bluetooth earbuds or Bluetooth headphones or anything like that with GarageBand, there is roughly a half second of delay, which is not very easy to play with. Regardless, I have yapped at you for quite long enough. Let me introduce you to this musical idea that I made probably about 3 years ago at this point, and that is what I'm going to be souping up for you guys. I decided probably about a week or two ago that it would be a cool idea to go through a lot of my older stuff that I made like 5 minutes worth of work on and didn't go any further with. And this was like top 3 contender for doing that with. But that said, a lot of the music that I've been making recently has been more along the lines of fast music, quicker paced music with choppier, more staccato notes all over the place. So I thought it would be a cool idea to switch it up by adding a lot of reverb, echo, all that kind of stuff, and making it a little bit slower. So I changed the instruments here, and I made that stuff happen. So that's what this looks like. So by this point in the process, I have a pretty decent baseline for what the idea is, for what the main motif is, all that kind of stuff. So now it's time, for me personally at least, to start playing around with the instruments and the volume levels and stuff like that. Not going too crazy with it yet. And I have a little bit of a philosophy for that might disagree with some people who make music, who produce stuff like that. A lot of people will probably suggest that it's better to get all the stuff on paper, just vomit all the ideas out, make it sound like a cohesive product, and then mix and master, then worry about the volumes, then worry about the super specific stuff. Me personally, my process involves a lot of basically like 10 hours of letting the music play on repeat, and then whatever the first thing I get tired of is the first thing I change. And doing that with instruments that sound like booty, it sucks. It really sucks. So anyways, I've got some okay instruments in place to where I don't mind listening to it over and over again, and then I have put down a couple of things that I think sound decent, and now I'm sitting here listening to it for like 10 minutes while I do work at my job, and I start to get tired of the instruments. I think this doesn't sound good together, so I go look for other instruments, adjust the volume levels, and that ends up sounding something like this. Now, for those of you who decided for whatever reason to watch this expertly edited video, you'll notice on the left side of the video that I put in there that all of the volume bars have been adjusted a little bit, but I'm definitely not claiming that this is a finished mixed product. That will come later, and I'll show you that process a little bit. So at this point in the process, I have made a main motif for the verse, or sometimes in this part of the process, I have decided that this sounds more like a chorus than a verse, which is also fine. But when I have a verse like this, the very next thing that I'm thinking about is, what am I doing at the end of this verse to lead it into the chorus? What am I doing to bridge from the verse to the chorus? And I'm also thinking about, if the motif of the verse repeats one time, what am I doing to switch it up the second time? I think a decent example of this is what I did here. Basically, I just threw some high notes in the second part of the motif in the soft piano, which is what I replaced the main melody with. And you'll also notice that I shifted the main melody, like I think half a beat or a full beat, I forget which one, because I thought it would sound cooler that way. You be the judge, I guess. Now, another thing that you might notice by this point is that I now have 5 audio channels in this project, and it doesn't sound like there are 5 different things going on. What's up with that? Well, something that I have discovered recently, I guess you could say, is that sometimes when you're working with GarageBand specifically, or in any DAW, I guess, sometimes you find an instrument that's pretty close to what you're looking for, but it's missing a certain timbre or quality that you really would like to have on it. And something I have begun to like doing more and more is taking another instrument at a lower volume and doubling it so that, like, let's say you have one that I've been doing a lot is a harsh synth with trumpets in the background. That one's really cool. That one sounds like I don't know what the name of the instrument is, but Insane in the Rain uses it sometimes. I tried to explain what it sounds like, but I looked back at it and it was like a 2-minute clip, so I just recorded a clip of it off of YouTube. Here you go. That song is called Forward by Insane in the Rain Music, by the way. You should definitely check it out. It is one of my favorite songs of all time. I don't even know if I can say top 100 anymore. I've listened to like 350 albums in the last 2 years. I've been listening to a lot of music, but it's definitely in my top 500 songs, and I know a lot of music. Let's put it that way. And to show you an example of what I'm talking about, here's a snippet of a song that I'm not sure I'm going to use anymore, where I was trying to recreate that instrument that I was just talking about. And I used a harsh synth and trumpets to make that happen. Or trumpets. Brass ensemble, I believe it's called. No, it's not exact, but it's 80% of the way there, and honestly, it ended up being better for the purpose I wanted it for anyways. So, yeah, anyways, I've gone off on like a 3-minute tangent just to tell you that sometimes when you put one instrument in and you also put another instrument in and you do the same thing with them, it sounds good. So, at this point in the process, I'm looking at the entirety of the mix, listening to the whole thing, and I'm thinking to myself, how full does this mix sound, and how full do I want it to sound? And to put it in layman's terms instead of like production terms, do I want this to sound super bare bones, or do I want it to sound more packed to the brim with instruments? And as examples of what I'm talking about, if you want an example of a super bare bones mix, look up the song War Ready by Vince Staples. If you want an example of a decently empty mix, look up In Da Club by 50 Cent, although I'm sure you've probably heard that one at this point. Nailing down a specific mix that has like a perfectly normal, not more, not less amount of instruments and stuff in it is difficult. But I guess if I had to give you like exactly one, I would go basically any song off of Rush's Moving Pictures album. Limelight's a good example. The mix on that song is so aggressively exactly what it needs to be to sound like there is a full band there and nothing more. The more stuff that you throw in the mix, the more difficult it gets to give good examples of like actually good songs that have a lot of stuff in the mix. Because having a bloated mix can actually be a really bad thing. That said, if I had to give a couple examples of songs that have a lot of stuff going on in the mix. Not a lot of like instruments doing stuff necessarily, but a lot of stuff going on in the mix. First example would be The Final Countdown by Europe, but specifically the music video version. The album version is clear cut, it's clean, concise. You know, it's a good cut, but the official video version is that same mix, but with audience applause over basically the entire song, and I think that it benefits from that in a way that honestly no other song I don't think ever has. I'm a music video hater. I always listen to album cuts. And another song that has a full mix that I think is a good song is Regular Disorder by Ricky Jamarez. That was one of my favorite songs this past year. Now, at the very top of the spectrum, where things get really bloated and there's so much going on that it's almost a little disorienting, you do not find this in pop music anywhere. It's just not a thing, because producers, mixers at that high of a level are not advocating that you put that much going on in the mix. It will turn people off from your music. So because of that, it's really difficult to find a song that has way too much going on in it. And it's even more difficult to find a song that has way too much going on and sounds good. But I have one. I do have one. And to really nail home the difference between an empty mix and a very full mix, I'm going to show you the first song that I gave you to listen to. I'm going to show you the last song right next to each other, so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So here is War Ready by Vince Staples.
Anything to a G. Life give limits, nigga hang from the tree. Cold game, all came in a dream. Woke up feeling like the walls caved in.
And then this. This is the Nwana remix of It's TV Time, or TV Time, I forget whether there's an It's in the title, by Toby Fox, creator of Deltarune, one of my favorite games of all time. Now, I don't know how you get 35 different versions of of a basic piano layered over each other at nearly the same volume to sound good, but you might think that sounds awful. I think that sounds amazing. I love that. I would never make music like that, but that is like I love it. That is awesome, dude. That mix is bloated to high hell, and I think it sounds amazing. And I don't think that's easy to do, by the way. That is extremely difficult to do, right? Like, even if you kind of go like, I don't get it, but it sounds all right. That's amazing for a mix that full. That is way too much in your mix. That is way too much. But anyway, we are 16 minutes into this video, and you've not heard any of the song that I started off telling you I was making since the 8-minute mark, because I've been rambling about stuff that's kind of adjacent. So I'm going to go back to that now. So anyways, at this point, Jesus Christ, what was I saying like 10 minutes ago? Oh, yeah. At this point, I'm listening to this piece and I'm noticing that the mix doesn't sound as full as I would like it to sound, and it needs something up high. So that's what I'm working on next. So I ignored the sound of the instrument. I basically figured out what rhythm I wanted, and I took my Bluetooth earbuds out and played a chord that works exactly once the 4 times that I play it. And then I told myself I would fix it later, and I'll show you what that sounds like now. So then after I created a dumpster fire, I went into editing mode, took all the notes, made them the chord that I wanted them to be, dragged them up an octave so that they were nice and up high, and I found a nice echoey, reverby synth that I could play them on, and it sounded like this. Okay, at this point, I'm sitting here listening to it, working at my machine at work and everything, and I'm thinking to myself, this sounds pretty good. I could sit here and listen to this for an hour, and I would get tired of it because, I listened to it for an hour, not because any part of it was bad. So at this point, I say in my mind, I need percussion of some sort, and I choose to work on that next. And basically what I do is I go into just a random drum set that sounds okay with this. It doesn't have to sound great. And I create 2 drum loops right next to each other to test. And of these 2, I like the second one better, so I removed the first one, copied the second one over to the first part, adjusted it a little bit, and this is what I ended up with. Then once I have recorded the drum track everywhere that I want it to be, so far at least, I duplicate that drum set and then copy the drum tracks over to the other 2 drum sets that I added for a total of 3 drum sets. And then I remove everything but the specific parts that I want. So like in the bass track, I get rid of the snare and cymbals and so on and so forth. And that sounds stupid, but I'll tell you why in a second. That ends up looking like this. Now, assuming that you are like me and you're not being frugal with storage on your iPad or whatever device you're using to use GarageBand Mobile, and you have downloaded all of the producer packs and instrument packs and everything, assuming you've done all that, there are so many instruments to choose from, and drums are no exception. So the reason that I separated out the drums into 3 different parts, or more depending on what I'm going for, is because now I can go through all the drum sets and I can pick a kick drum that sounds good. I can pick a snare drum that sounds good. I can pick cymbals that sound good. And I can mix and match them to see if they work with each other instead of just being stuck with whatever is on the drum set I picked. I kept all the names the same so you could see what drums I ended up picking out. And this is the drum sound, I guess, that I went for. Now, when you want to mix all of the instruments, generally it's better to have most of the instruments that you want for the song in the song already before you start mixing, because then if you don't do that, then every time you decide to add a new instrument, it just sounds like dog shit every time you put it in. You kind of want everything to not sound so much better than whatever you're trying to see if it'll work, because you don't want to have to do like an hour of work just to get an instrument to sound like it could fit in, and then you decide you don't want it anyway. You know what I mean? Drum sets, on the other hand, are a bit of a luxury that you have, because what other stuff are you going to be adding in? Like, you want the same drum timbre the entire song for the most part. So you can kind of mix the drums whenever you want. So I'll show you the process of that real quick. I'll go through each individual part of the drums. Now, something you'll see me do in this process is take the little orbs, circles, whatever you want to call them, and move them up and down like I'm increasing the treble and the bass in different ways, because I want to see what the, how would you put it? I want to see what the best timbre for the sound is. I want to see like what pitch I can max out a little bit to make it sound the best, or, you know, take away. Now, you'll also notice that I completely ransacked the bass sound in the cymbal track. And you might be thinking to yourself, why would you do that? Cymbals aren't bass instruments, so they don't have any bass. Well, that's actually where you're wrong. You're stupid, actually. No, I'm just joking. Any sound that you have is going to have the sound that it mainly is. So, like, the specific pitch that you play on a piano, for, let's say, is going to be the most hearable one. But then all throughout the rest of the piano, as an example, of course, you're going to hear notes like bass notes at the very bottom. You're going to hear treble notes at the very top, and they're going to be barely audible. But professional producers are going to want to take that kind of thing out. And if you want to go on an interesting little rabbit hole on your own time, kind of relating to this point, you should look up on YouTube the overtones of bells. It is insane, the science behind music that nobody knows. But regardless, the main point that I was trying to get at here is the reason that I completely axed the bass in the cymbal track is because you can accidentally create a muddy mix if you don't get rid of quote-unquote accidental noises that you don't need, because they just stay littered around the mix until at some point eventually you just have a stupid amount of ambient noise in the background that you don't need. Now, as I have researched recently, what I am doing here is not technically the solution to this problem. What I'm looking for are high and low pass filters, which are tools specifically made to remove the high end and low end that you don't need. However, that is not something that is native to GarageBand as far as I can tell. You can high pass filter your entire song, but not a specific instrument, and same with the low pass filter. So what I'm doing here is, what's a good analogy? What I'm doing here is less of deciding that I want to make a pizza and grabbing the shredded mozzarella that I need to do it, and more of deciding to make a pizza, looking in the fridge, seeing 3 slices of mozzarella cheese and a full bag of Mexican shredded cheese and saying, yeah, good enough. I personally would advise that you download a high and low pass filter to add to your GarageBand. Like, look up how to do that on YouTube and do that. But me personally, my iPad is already shitting itself every day, so I'm not downloading basically anything else to it. I don't want to risk losing my iPad entirely. So at this point, I'm listening to the song and I'm thinking I need something to fill out the mid-range a little bit. And so that's the thing that I choose to work on next. I throw something in the upper mid-range, and that's what this sounds like. Now, the original plan was for me to kind of just show you everything I got up to that point and be like, all right, bye. But I worked like another 10 hours on this song after the point that I got to with those recordings. And I figured, you know what the hell? I'll show you the whole thing. So far, at least. It's not 100% mixed, and it's not 100% all the notes are exactly where they need to be. But this is where I am right now, I guess. So here you go. I'll just let the video end with this.